So the first thing that we want to do when making a new jig is that we take into consideration that step one is the first thing people will be opening up. So we want to add in some introductory text. This text will just cover what the jig is going to be about. Now on step two, I want to follow through and discuss the internal components that I mentioned on step one. So what I'm going to do at the beginning is I'm going to pull out this outer casing and reveal those internal components. To do that, I'm pressing Shift in order to multi-select these external pieces. And I'm also keeping in mind these little dots, which I'd like to move out of the way as well. And with everything selected, I'm going to select the Move tool and pull these objects out of the way. I'd also like to have this barrel out of the way as well, so that I can see those little internal components here. Now with these out of the way, I'm going to the multi-select menu, and I'm going to use the lasso select tool to select these as a group. And then if I go to color, I can use this hide button to turn on transparency. Now when I go from step one to step two, I get a nice smooth transitional fade out of those objects. Now on step two, because I want to start by discussing how the hairdryer works, I'm going to focus on the intake fan. So what I want to do is give this object a label, as it's the focus of this step. And I'm turning that label on now. And now with that label on, it'll just be visible on step two. I also want to give this intake fan some spin. Something to keep in mind when working with fans is the leading edge of the fan blade. So in this situation, it looks like it's pushing the air forwards. So I want this to spin back the other way so that it draws the air in. I can also type in a value here if I want it to spin a bit faster. Now when I click off the fan object, as you can see, it stops. The spin is still present in the scene, but we don't have it spinning all the time unless selected. This is in order for you to be able to select things that are hidden behind the object. For instance, if you had a lot of cogwheels spinning in the scene together, it would be very hard to select something just behind them. So that's why we have it turned off unless you have the object selected. With the intake fan spinning and with it clearly labelled, I'd also like to show the air flowing into the hairdryer. In order to do this, I'm going to add an effects object. If I go to the model library and I select the effects category, as you can see, we have a number of different effects. For this case, I'm going to select the flow cone in. And now that we have this new object in the scene, I'm going to apply it to all of my steps. We consider this best practice so that later on in the jig, if you decide you want to add in different movements and transitions in the scene, the object is available on every step. So if I now go from step two to step one, we have this object in the step and it's editable. So while in step two, I'm going to position it at the entry point of the hairdryer. And to do that, I'm using the Move tool. And now while rotating the object, I'm going to press down Shift. This will allow me to snap my rotations by 15 degrees. And it can be a great way of achieving a 90-degree turn on your objects. This can be great for some components when they're designed in a different program and haven't been positioned to match up with your objects. It means that they're much easier to align to each other. So with this at the rear of the hairdryer, I'm also going to change its color to a soft blue just so you can see that it's cool air that's blowing into the hairdryer. So now that it's positioned in step 2, you'll find that it hasn't been changed on step 1. As you can see, it's back where it had initially loaded. So what I want to do is go to step 2 and press and hold in the toolbar to open up the replicate menu. And I'm going to copy its position, rotation, scale, and color. And I'm going to copy those across to the previous step. While on step 1, I'm going to hide it and turn on its transparency. And now when I go from step 1 to step 2, I get a nice fade in of this effects object, as well as a fade out of that external casing. And on step 2, what I'm going to do next is add in the descriptive text of what's happening in the scene. And for my next scene, I'm going to add another step. And now on step 3, I want to show the air being heated up by these pieces at the front of the hairdryer. So what I want to do is I want to remove a bit of the distractions that are happening on the right-hand side of the screen. These are no longer the focus and they're drawing a bit too much attention. So I'm going to select the flow object and go to color and hide this visibility. I'm also going to select the intake fan and turn off its label. Now I'm going to focus on these front components. So the main focus of this step will be the nichrome wire. So I'll give that a label and turn the label on. Now another part of this step is that I want to show that the air is being heated up. So to do that, it's the nichrome wire that heats up that air. So I'm going to select the nichrome wire and give it a warm red color. I'll also select the mica plating and give it a warmer color as well. And now when I go from step 2 to step 3, you can see that this fades into a soft warm red. With that part done, I also want to show the air coming out the other end, and I want to show that it's been warmed up. So to do that, I'm going to bring in another effects object. I'll select the flow cone out this time. And again, I'm replicating this object across all of my steps so that I can edit it later if I decide to. Now I'm going to position this at the end of the hairdryer. And again, I'm pressing Shift to snap my rotations. Now I'm conscious of the fact that the nozzle narrows at the end of the hairdryer, so I'm also going to snap the scale and draw it in. And position it right at the nozzle front. And I'd also like to show that the air is heating up, so I'm going to give it a soft red color as well. So I'm going to add in the descriptive text for step 3. Now I'm going to step through and have a look at my 3 steps so far. I'm conscious of the fact that I haven't copied these across, so I think the air flow effect is going to move back to its initial position. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to step 3 and select this object, press and hold to open the replicate menu, and now I'm going to select my movement or position, the rotation, the scale and color, and I'm going to copy those across to all of my previous steps. Now on step 2, I'm going to select the color palette and hide to turn on transparency. I'm going to copy this across just to the previous step. So now if I step through from 1 to 3, I think I'll have nice smooth transitions. Now I'm pretty happy with this. The next thing I'd like to do is show the hairdryer fully enclosed, but while turned on as well. So to do this, I'm going to select step 1 and add a new step. And as you can see, it's an exact duplicate of step 1. Now on this step, because I've replicated my object from step 3, this flow object here, and step 2, onto all of my steps, these objects are still present in all 4 of the steps, and I can select them here and turn off their transparency to make them fully visible. And you can see the flow of the air moving through the hairdryer. So the next thing I'm going to do to demonstrate that the hairdryer is turned on is move its switch from the off to the on position. So I'm going to lift that up. I'm also going to make a couple of these objects appear to glow, as though they have backlighting. I'll select these bars and these dots here, and in the color palette, I'm going to go to materials and scroll down to the unlit material. This means that it isn't affected by lighting or shadows in the scene, and it will be as bright as that color can possibly be. So if I go to color and I crank up to the brightest white, you can see that it looks as though it's turned on. Now when I go from step 1 to step 4, you can see that it looks like the hairdryer is turning itself on. Now another thing that I want to add in to add some more realism is to add a sound effect to my scene. So if I go down to the instructions panel here, you can see that I have the ability to record as well as add in sound effects. If I hit the record button and I speak into a microphone, I'll be able to save that recording on this step. So it's a great way of adding in further information or instructions to the step. In this case, I'm just going to add in a sound effect. Now when I press the play button, as you can hear the hairdryer sound effect, I can press pause to stop it, and I can also remove it by pressing the delete button and choose a different sound effect. Now, as you can see, we've had some recent updates to the Jig workshop. One of the features that we've improved upon is the ability for you to upload images and videos into your Jig. So if I go to step 1 and I add a new step, this will just create a nice clean step for me to upload that video. And if I go to what used to be the model library and click this plus button, you can see that I now have some other options. So I can add in my own CAD files, or I could open up the model library like usual, or I could bring in an image or video. Now, images are a great way for you to bring in more data into your Jig. You could add things like part guides, graphs, and images of your model and other forms of media that you already have into your Jig. In this case, I'm going to bring in a video file. Now we've got our file in the scene. While I usually recommend that you replicate new models in the scene across all your steps, I'm going to say that it's best not to do that with a video file. That's just because the video file also contains sound effects and any music or audio that was a part of that video. And I have music in this one. So if I want to make sure that it isn't playing on step 4 and anything further, for example, step 4 has my hairdryer sound effect, and I might not want those audios to conflict with each other. So if I want this to just play on step 5, I just click off. And as you can see, the replicate tool is gone. And if I go to step 4, this file is no longer in the scene. So with my file in the scene on step 5, I'm going to position this behind the hairdryer as a backing board. So I'm just moving it into position, rotating it a bit. I'll scale it up. Now, as you can see, the video file is white in this scene. That's because the first frame of the video is white. Often when you bring in videos into the Jig workshop, it'll be black, and that's because the first frame is black. Now, the video plays correctly when viewed in flat mode or in AR mode, but we don't have the video playing in the scene during edit mode. So with this positioned as I want it in the scene, and with all my other steps looking pretty good, I'm going to go to step 1, and I'm going to view this jig in AR mode. And as you can see, we've got our hairdryer model in the scene. If I zoom in, you can see that the intake fan is spinning and we've got our flow effect into the hairdryer. I go to step 3. We have the warm wires and the hot air coming out the other end. And now, as you can hear, we've got our hairdryer sound effect playing. As you can see, I can play it again by pressing the play button. I can also pause it by clicking on the speaker here. And if I go to step 5, we have our hairdryer and the video file in our scene. And as you can hear, we've got audio and the music that comes from the video file too. And this object works just like any other object in the scene. You can even step behind it. And so that's our jig so far.